At exactly 3:17 a.m., I woke up to chaos. The shriek of alarms pierced the quiet. Blue and red lights flared against my bedroom walls like lightning flashes in a storm. I stumbled toward the window, pulse hammering in my throat, half asleep and fully panicked, only to see what looked like the opening shot of a Hollywood raid. Officers in tactical gear moved like clockwork down my suburban street, shouting into radios and securing perimeters. But the real horror? It wasn't the raid. It was the empty space where my Jeep had been. Gone. Vanished. Like it had never existed. In its place stood an orange traffic cone, and stuck to it was a handwritten note on a bright yellow sticky pad. It read, "Code violation, vehicle confiscated by HOA." I stared at it, thinking I must still be dreaming. My Jeep, my very locked, very parked Jeep, was supposed to be untouchable. It wasn't just my vehicle. It was wired, locked, and positioned under very specific instructions from a federal task force I had been quietly assisting. And now it was gone. That's when the knock came at my door. 2 federal agents stood outside. Their faces were grim, their questions sharper than the night air. "Where's the vehicle?" one of them asked. And that's when I had to say the most ridiculous sentence of my life. It was towed by the neighborhood HOA president. A year ago, I moved into Oak Ridge Haven, a pristine little cul-de-sac outside Denver that smelled like fresh-cut lawns and new beginnings. After years of bouncing between deployments and contracts as a security consultant, I was ready for a quiet life. A garage for rebuilding bikes. A backyard for my dog. Peace. What I didn't know then was that peace had an enemy. A 5'4" enemy with a clipboard and an attitude. Her name was Cheryl Vaughn, but everyone in the neighborhood called her something else behind her back. Karen in chief. As the self-appointed tyrant of the Oak Ridge HOA, Cheryl didn't just enforce the rules, she was the rules. If your grass grew too long, you got a fine. If your mailbox wasn't beige enough, you got a warning. If you left your trash cans out past 9 a.m., a formal complaint would be filed before you finished your morning coffee. And then there was my Jeep. It was matte black, reinforced, and custom-built with a look most people would call tactical. Cheryl saw it as a declaration of war. The first time she saw it, I remember telling a friend, she looked like I'd just parked a tank on her rose bushes. "It doesn't belong in this neighborhood," she snapped, arms crossed, lips so pursed they practically disappeared. "It looks like something from a Mad Max movie." I tried to be civil, told her it was a work vehicle, that I was collaborating with local law enforcement on a sensitive operation. She rolled her eyes. "Nice story, soldier boy. Next time, buy a Honda like a normal person." And just like that, the games began. Every week, new letters arrived in my mailbox. Accusations of unauthorized vehicle modifications, excessive tactical aesthetics, and my personal favorite, parking intimidation. Apparently, Cheryl believed my Jeep was psychologically harassing the neighborhood. What she didn't know, because she was too busy highlighting bylaws with pink markers, was that my Jeep had been outfitted with covert surveillance tech. High-resolution cameras, motion-activated recorders, GPS tracking, all silently capturing movements on our street for a long-term federal sting targeting a suburban drug ring. They'd chosen my Jeep because it didn't stand out to criminals. It stood out to rule-obsessed people like Cheryl. And that was exactly the point. The fewer people who knew, the better. The task force's instructions were crystal clear. Don't move it. Keep it locked. Change its angle occasionally. Notify us if anything suspicious happens. So I added a heavy-duty security lock to the front wheel. Parked it right in front of my house. Made sure it looked planted, but not abandoned. Unfortunately for me, Cheryl saw it and snapped. She reported it 5 times to the HOA. Escalated each complaint from visual nuisance to abandoned vehicle. I explained it wasn't abandoned. That it was on private property. That it was parked legally. Didn't matter. Cheryl believed she had the authority to deal with neighborhood hazards. And one sunny afternoon, while I was out grabbing groceries, Cheryl Vaughn brought in a tow truck and a pair of bolt cutters and made the worst decision of her life. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon. I was gone for less than an hour, quick grocery run, in and out. When I pulled back into the driveway, I didn't even notice the Jeep was gone at first. I thought maybe I was parked farther up the curb. Maybe someone had borrowed it with authorization. Then I saw it. The cone. The sticky note. And the absence of thousands of dollars worth of surveillance gear. I sprinted to Cheryl's house, practically punching her doorbell. No answer. Just silence, and the faint sound of a lawn sprinkler from 2 houses down. An hour later, I got a formal email. Dear Mr. Rourke, the HOA has relocated your non-compliant vehicle to ensure the aesthetic integrity of the neighborhood and remove visual pollution. Cheryl Vaughn, HOA President. I laughed, genuinely laughed, right until the wave of panic hit. The surveillance equipment, the encrypted data unit, the federal task force. This wasn't a normal vehicle anymore. It was government property. I called Detective Cole Ramirez immediately. He didn't laugh. 30 minutes later, he was at my door, wearing plain clothes and a look that said, "Please tell me this is a prank." When I showed him the email and the cone, he just blinked. "She cut the lock?" he asked, barely above a whisper. "Clean through," I said, like it was a plastic tie. His jaw tightened. "Matt, she just tampered with federal surveillance equipment. That's obstruction at best, and felony destruction of government property at worst." That's when things stopped being funny. We launched into emergency retrieval mode. Problem was, no one knew where the Jeep had been taken. The HOA had no towing records, no paperwork filed, no notifications sent to city enforcement or local tow lots. Cheryl had done all this solo, no board vote, no oversight, which meant she'd hidden it somewhere. Worse, the sting operation the Jeep had been monitoring? Blown. The suspects noticed the vehicle was gone and vanished before agents could move. Months of preparation, down the drain. All because Cheryl didn't like how a car looked. And that's how I ended up back on my porch at 3:17 a.m., watching a task force scramble to salvage what they could without their surveillance hub. The next morning, I got a text from Detective Ramirez. "We found it. You're going to want to see this." 10 minutes later, I was riding shotgun in his unmarked SUV. He didn't say a word the entire drive, just clenched his jaw like it was the only thing keeping him from shouting. We pulled off the main road, wound down a dirt lane, and stopped behind a rusted gate near a shed I'd never noticed before, an HOA maintenance lot. Ramirez walked up to the gate and pointed. The lock was hanging open, like it had been forgotten. Inside the chain-link fence was a dumping ground, old tarps, traffic cones, a few abandoned vehicles with peeling parking stickers, and my Jeep. It was filthy, scratched, leaning like someone had shoved it into place. The driver's side mirror was cracked. The glove box looked like it had been pried open with a screwdriver. The reinforced case that housed the encrypted recording unit? Wide open. Gutted. I didn't say anything. Couldn't. I just stood there while Ramirez quietly muttered, "She turned a maintenance shed into a private impound lot." Jesus. He started taking photos. Called it in. Requested backup and a federal evidence team. And then, like she had a sixth sense for drama, Cheryl Vaughn appeared. She came clip-clopping through the gravel in her signature heels like she was arriving at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Bright red blazer. Clipboard. Smug as ever. "Oh good," she said with a fake smile. "You found it. I was about to notify you, but I assumed you'd already figured it out." Ramirez didn't even blink. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle." Cheryl's smile faltered. "Excuse me? I'm the HOA president. I have the authority to remove any unregistered." "You removed federal surveillance property from an active operation," Ramirez snapped. "Do you understand how serious that is?" Her face twitched. She looked confused, like this was the first time anyone had dared speak to her without a sugarcoat. That Jeep was just sitting there. It had a lock. It hadn't moved. I was doing the community a favor. I stared at her. A favor? She thought she'd won some Suburban war against unsightly vehicles. She had no idea she'd just committed multiple felonies. Ramirez motioned to one of the arriving officers. "Take her in for questioning." Cheryl didn't go quietly. She kept talking, kept defending herself. She called the Jeep an eyesore, said she was restoring visual harmony, that she had every right. It was like watching someone light their own legal future on fire while proudly narrating it. As the evidence team began examining the Jeep, I pulled out my phone. "Want to see the footage?" I asked. Ramirez raised an eyebrow. "There's footage." My neighbor Sam had captured everything on his porch cam. Cheryl walking up in broad daylight, bolt cutters in hand, smirking, cutting through the heavy-duty lock like it was paper, waving in a budget tow truck with zero official markings, and laughing as it hauled the Jeep away. That laugh? It was going to haunt her. And for the first time since this whole disaster began, I started to believe justice might actually be coming. Word spread faster than wildfire. By Friday evening, the Oak Ridge Haven Community Center was standing room only. Everyone, and I mean everyone, showed up. Not just the neighbors who'd endured years of passive-aggressive emails and lawn fines. We're talking reporters, legal observers, Even a couple guys in dark suits who definitely weren't here for the free cookies. At exactly 6:15 p.m., Cheryl Vaughn strutted into the room like she still ran it. Red blazer? Of course. Clipboard? Clutched like a shield. She approached the podium with the confidence of someone who still thought she was winning. She tapped the mic twice, smiled like she was giving a TED Talk, and said, "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I want to address the recent incident involving the removal of an illegally parked, unregistered vehicle from our neighborhood." The room buzzed. Someone near the back snorted, probably Sam. But Cheryl was undeterred. She launched into a syrupy speech about aesthetic standards and neighborhood pride. She insisted that the Jeep had clearly been abandoned and that she had followed proper HOA protocol. Then she dropped this gem. "Frankly, I believe I was misled. I had no knowledge of any covert operations or government affiliation. I was simply acting in the best interest of our community. That was it." I stood up. "Misled," I said, loud enough to cut through her performance. "You cut the lock off a federal vehicle. You towed it without authorization, and you bragged about it on Facebook." A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Cheryl stiffened. I walked down the aisle, straight to the front, and handed a USB drive to the community center's IT guy who, judging by his grin, had been waiting for this moment. The screen behind Cheryl flickered to life. First up, the ring footage. There she was, bold as ever, striding toward my Jeep, bolt cutters in hand. She smirked right into the camera before slicing through the lock. Then she gestured to the tow truck, which rattled into frame with no logos, no credentials. As the Jeep was hauled away, Cheryl turned to the lens and laughed. The room went dead silent. Then came the screenshots. One by one, her Facebook posts lit up the screen like evidence in a courtroom. Finally got rid of that military cosplay junk pile. Sometimes you have to break a few rules to keep the streets clean. Visual pollution? Not on my watch. Cheryl's face went from confident to clammy in real time. At that moment, Detective Ramirez stepped forward. "We've reviewed the HOA charter, the removal procedures, and the documentation, or lack thereof," he said, voice calm but razor-sharp. "Ms. Vaughn not only bypassed the board entirely, but failed to notify any city or federal agency, used an unlicensed towing company, and stored the vehicle in an unauthorized location. Her actions compromised an active investigation and destroyed federal surveillance equipment." Gasps. Audible ones. People shifting in their seats like they were watching a courtroom drama unfold live. Cheryl opened her mouth, but Ramirez wasn't done. "Furthermore," he continued, "we've uncovered evidence that this wasn't a one-time mistake. Ms. Vaughn has operated a rogue vehicle removal operation for months, without HOA board approval, using HOA funds, and falsifying expense reports." That's when Greg, one of the more timid board members who had spent years looking like Cheryl's hostage, finally stood up. "I'd like to make a motion to suspend Ms. Vaughn as HOA president, pending internal review and legal investigation." Another member raised a hand. Seconded. A third mumbled, "All in favor?" The response wasn't just unanimous, it was thunderous. Cheryl's mouth dropped open, like she had never once imagined this ending with her not in charge. "You can't do this," she snapped. "This is a power grab. I built this HOA. I stepped beside Ramirez and replied, and you tore it down in one afternoon. And just when we thought she couldn't dig herself any deeper." Cheryl whipped out a folded piece of paper from her clipboard and waved it in the air like it was Excalibur. "This is a cease and desist letter," she barked, "filed by my attorney against Mr. Rourke and the local police department for entrapment, defamation, and emotional distress." Ramirez took one glance at the letter, handed it back, and smirked. "That lawyer? Trent Maxwell? Yeah. He's already under investigation for fraud and 3 other HOA-related lawsuits. Good luck with that." The crowd broke into stunned laughter. Cheryl looked around and realized, for the first time, she was completely, undeniably alone. Even the residents who used to back her tyranny leaned away like they were dodging splash damage. Sam, never one to miss a moment, leaned in from the back and whispered just loud enough. "Ding dong, the witch is cooked." Outside, people clapped. Inside, they cheered. It was spontaneous, cathartic, and louder than any HOA vote had ever been. Ramirez leaned over to me and said, "We'll be forwarding everything to the DA. There will be charges. Maybe not all federal, but she's not walking away clean." And just like that, the neighborhood was free. Free from fines about mailbox colors. Free from threats over holiday decorations. Free from the reign of a woman who thought power meant punishment. And as I walked back home, Someone had already taped a note to Cheryl's old violation box by the clubhouse. It said, "Retired. Permanently." Within 48 hours, Oak Ridge Haven went from peaceful neighborhood to ground zero for HOA warfare. It started with a simple Reddit post. My neighbor Sam uploaded the ring cam footage to the r/entitled people subreddit under the title, HOA Karen cuts lock and tows Jeep. Didn't know it belonged to the feds. The post exploded. Within 2 hours, it hit the front page. By noon, it had 1 million views. By nightfall, TikTok creators were reenacting Cheryl's bolt cutter moment in slow motion with emo music and dramatic zoom-ins. One even edited the footage like a scene from CSI, complete with flashing red lights and a deep-voiced narrator. Cheryl's face, once a symbol of HOA authority, was suddenly everywhere. Twitter threads called her suburbia's most dangerous tyrant. News segments picked up the story. Even a legal podcast ran a segment titled, "When HOA Presidents Go Rogue." Strangers started driving by just to see the Jeep, which, yes, had been returned to me scratched, muddy, and battle-worn, but still standing proud in its usual spot. I cleaned it up, patched what I could, and parked it right where it had always been, front and center, under the neighborhood's newly upgraded ring cameras. Someone taped a sticky note to the bumper that said, "Jeep 1, HOA 0. I left it there. Meanwhile, Cheryl wasn't done making things worse. 3 days after the HOA meeting imploded, she appeared outside the local courthouse wearing a wrinkled suit and the expression of someone who still didn't believe reality applied to her. She called a press conference. Uninvited, of course. Standing beside her was none other than Trent Maxwell, the attorney Ramirez had warned me about, the legal equivalent of an oil slick in a cheap suit. Greasy hair, oversized sunglasses, and a grin like he'd just lost a parking ticket and thought it was a Supreme Court victory. Trent addressed the reporters like he was auditioning for a crime drama. "My client is the real victim here. The Jeep was unmarked. There were no visible indicators it was federal property. This entire situation was a setup, a coordinated entrapment. We are filing suit against the city, the HOA board, the police department, and Mr. Rourke personally." It was so ridiculous, one of the reporters laughed on camera. The backlash was instant. The district attorney's office filed official charges later that same day. Unauthorized towing, destruction of property, obstruction of an investigation, tampering with surveillance equipment. And while the feds hadn't issued federal charges yet, they sent a blistering formal letter to the HOA demanding full cooperation in the ongoing investigation and calling Cheryl's actions recklessly disruptive to national operations. The HOA board, what was left of it, panicked. 3 members resigned within a week. Greg, the one who motioned to suspend Cheryl, stepped up as interim president and took exactly 1 day to dissolve Cheryl's beloved violation committee. Neighbors clapped in the streets. Literally. Someone baked cookies shaped like little Jeeps. Another neighbor installed a lawn ornament of a bolt cutter with a "Do Not Use on Federal Vehicles" tag attached. Sam, ever the opportunist, launched a website called HOAWatchdog.net, cataloging Cheryl's entire meltdown with screenshots, footage, timelines, and yes, merch. You could buy T-shirts that read "Visual Pollution Survivor," coffee mugs with Cheryl's infamous note, "Code violation, vehicle confiscated," a bumper sticker that said, "Ask me about the time my Jeep took down an HOA." To my absolute shock, people actually bought them. Of course, Cheryl still tried to fight back. Trent Maxwell filed a countersuit against everyone, me, the board, the city, the police, alleging I had lured Cheryl into misconduct by intentionally provoking her with an aggressively tactical vehicle. Yes, that was the actual wording. The judge didn't just throw the case out, he mocked it. The clerk at the hearing was visibly trying not to laugh. But Cheryl's reputation? Torched. The internet wasn't done with her. Not even close. Memes flooded in. One had her photoshopped into a Grand Theft Auto loading screen holding bolt cutters, captioned "Mission failed. Federal charges incoming." Another turned her press conference into a rap remix, auto-tuned to the beat of her phrase, "I didn't know it was federal." Teenagers who didn't even live in HOA communities started calling their controlling parents full Cheryl. She was viral, but not in the way she wanted. And in the middle of all the memes, the mockery, and the media frenzy, something strange and beautiful happened in our neighborhood. People started talking. Porches came alive again. Kids played without fear of fines. Flags flew. Lawn chairs popped up. Sidewalk chalk murals reappeared overnight. For the first time since I'd moved to Oak Ridge Haven, it felt like a neighborhood, not a battlefield. The iron grip was gone, and no one wanted it back. It didn't take long. 1 week after Cheryl's viral implosion, the final charge sheet landed. Detective Ramirez stopped by my place personally to hand me a copy. He was off-duty, in jeans and a faded baseball cap, but the folder in his hand looked heavy, not just physically, but symbolically. Inside were 5 counts. Obstruction of justice, tampering with federal surveillance equipment, operating an unlicensed towing operation, unauthorized use of community funds, and suspected embezzlement. Turns out, Cheryl had been cooking the HOA books for years. An audit by the HOA's insurance provider revealed she'd used community funds to pay towing fees to that shady unmarked truck, hire private contractors without board approval, and even buy her own printer ink, filed under administrative recovery. It added up to thousands of dollars, and it was all about to come crashing down. By then, Cheryl had gone silent. Her house sat dark, her mailbox overflowed, and even her lawyer, Trent Maxwell, had stopped returning calls. Word on the street was she was trying to sell her home quietly, but no one wanted to buy the Jeep lady's house. Still, she wasn't going to jail. Instead, she took a plea deal. No prison time, but she was ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA, fined heavily by the state, and, my favorite part, banned from serving on any neighborhood board for the next 20 years. She left Oak Ridge Haven in the dead of night. No one waved goodbye. No one cared. Meanwhile, the neighborhood was thriving. People started calling our street the Eyesore Estates, a tongue-in-cheek nod to Cheryl's favorite insult. The nickname stuck. And so did the vibe. We planted trees, held weekend BBQs. Neighbors who had barely said more than a nod for years were now sharing tools, jokes, and beers. The passive-aggressive emails stopped. The lawn fines vanished. And the Jeep? It became a legend. Kids would walk past it and salute. Strangers took photos next to it. Someone spray-painted Community Watchdog on a nearby utility box. I even got a hand-painted sign from the neighbors that read, "Reserved for tactical eyesore." We bolted it into the curb. Even the mailman asked to take a picture with it. But then came the twist no one saw coming. One Saturday morning, Officer Ramirez and Detective Sasha Lynn pulled up in an unmarked black SUV. But this time, they weren't here on official business. They were smiling, grinning, actually, and Sasha was holding a giant set of keys. "Come with us," she said. They led me around the back of my house and pointed at the lot behind the HOA maintenance shed, the one where my Jeep had been illegally stashed. The city had auctioned it off after the investigation ended. "We bought it," Ramirez said, tossing me the keys. "On behalf of the task force. And we're giving it to you." I blinked. They weren't kidding. The garage, Cheryl's secret impound graveyard, was now mine. Signed. Sealed. Deeded. I stood there in shock. Then I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the keys. The very place where Cheryl dragged my Jeep without permission? Now it was legally under my name. Poetic justice didn't even begin to cover it. So I did what any self-respecting, Jeep-defending, HOA-fighting civilian would do. I turned it into a community garage. Workbenches for teens to fix up their bikes. A mini repair bay for neighbors to tinker with engines. A tool wall donated by the entire block. No permits. No fines. No clipboard-carrying tyrants. We called it simply the garage. And to christen our new space, Ramirez and Sasha organized a surprise. 1 week later, a slow-rolling Jeep parade cruised down Oak Ridge Haven. Vets, officers, civilians, everyone showed up. Jeeps of all shapes, colors, and states of disrepair. Flags waving. Horns honking. At the front of the line, my Jeep, fresh coat of matte black, buffed clean, and now bearing a new decal across the hood. Community Watchdog. The neighborhood lined the streets, cheering like it was a hometown hero returning from battle. Sam live-streamed the whole thing, and yes, it went viral again. Sasha gave a short speech. Then she handed me a plaque that read, "An appreciation for keeping your cool when your HOA went full villain." We laughed, but we all knew this had been more than just a neighborhood drama. It had been a battle between control and community, between ego and empathy. And we'd won. It ended on a Saturday. Warm breeze. Morning coffee. Quiet. I was sitting on my porch, scrolling through the latest round of HOA Karen memes. Yes, she was still trending, when I saw the convoy. 3 black SUVs. 1 unmarked sedan. 2 federal marshals. They rolled into the neighborhood like the opening scene of a political thriller. But this time, they weren't just here to investigate. They were here to end it. They walked calmly to Cheryl Vaughn's house. Knocked once. Waited. No answer. So they did what federal marshals do. A locksmith was already on standby. The door clicked open within minutes. Some neighbors watched through blinds. Others came outside, popcorn in hand. And then, finally, she appeared. Cheryl Vaughn. The HOA president turned suburban pariah. She looked nothing like the woman who once marched through this neighborhood like a general. Her iconic red blazer was wrinkled. Her hair unkempt. She clutched a manila folder like it might still save her. It wouldn't. Her hands were cuffed gently but firmly in front. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. But the look on her face? It wasn't anger. It was disbelief. Like she still thought this was all a misunderstanding. That at some point, the world would realize she'd been right all along. But there were no speeches. No supporters. Just the slow, silent walk to the waiting SUV. And when the convoy rolled away, something remarkable happened. The entire block cheered. Unprompted. Uncoordinated. But absolutely unified. Sam even set off a couple leftover fireworks from the 4th of July. Because of course he did. Detective Sasha Lynn dropped by later that afternoon to debrief a few residents. She stopped by my porch with an update. Final charges are locked, she said, handing me a printout. Obstruction. Tampering. Unauthorized operation of a tow service. Embezzlement. Misuse of community funds. We're closing the case. But what happened next was even bigger. The HOA? Gone. The board resigned. The bylaws, Cheryl's holy commandments, were now just paper in a binder nobody wanted to open. Greg, the former interim president, oversaw the transition. When I asked him what came next, he shrugged. Maybe we just go back to being neighbors. And you know what? That was enough. From that moment on, the neighborhood came alive. No more passive-aggressive warning notes. No more beige-only mailboxes. No more finding kids for sidewalk chalk or dogs for barking. People planted flowers that didn't match. Painted mailboxes in bold colors. Built lawn decorations that would have once triggered fines. No one cared. No one wanted control anymore. The air felt lighter. For the first time in years, Oak Ridge Haven wasn't a place you survived. It was a place you lived. As a thank you, the residents pitched in and gifted me something unexpected, a custom steel sign, bolted right into the curb in front of my house. It read, "Reserved for tactical eyesore." It became a local landmark. Even the mailman posed with it. But that wasn't the best part. The best part came 1 week later. The garage, formerly Cheryl's secret impound shed, was booming. Kids were fixing up bikes. Veterans were hosting weekend workshops. One guy even started teaching welding. And parked outside, right in the sun, was my Jeep. Still scratched. Still dented. But stronger than ever. A symbol of everything we'd been through. A reminder that sometimes, the thing someone calls ugly is actually what saves the day. And yeah, it still had the lock scars where Cheryl's bolt cutters left their mark. We didn't fix them. We left them on purpose. So here's the thing. You'd think a story like this would end with a legal victory, or a settlement, or some big press release. But this one? It ended with the community finally breathing again. It ended with neighbors sitting on porches, with BBQs that didn't require permits, with chalk on the sidewalks, laughter in the yards, and a Jeep that refused to be silenced. Cheryl became a cautionary tale, a meme, a reminder that power without empathy leads nowhere. And sometimes, all it takes to unravel an entire toxic system is one overconfident clipboard queen who thought cutting a lock would be the end of a problem. Instead, it was the beginning.